Parasha Shemini, literally the eighth, is the eighth day after 7 days of consecration of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle in the desert. So this day, the eighth day, is the first day of actual service in the Mishkan. Aaron and his sons engage in the service as the Kohanim. And as they present their offerings, the presence of God appears and consumes the offerings in front of the people, in front of the Kohanim, and the Am rejoices. But the oldest two sons, Nadab and Avihu of Aharon, come into the sanctuary with what is called an Esh Zara, literally a strange fire, a fire that was not commanded by God. And they come forward into the Mishkan of their own volition and of their own election, and present this fire in their fire pans before God. It isn't welcomed, and God's wrath comes out against them in the form of fire and burns them, and they die. There is a strong halting of the rejoicing at the death of the sons of Aharon. Aharon hears it, and it says, Vayidom Aharon. Aharon was completely still at hearing the news of the death of his oldest boys. Their bodies are removed from the sanctuary, and God instructs that Aharon and his sons, his remaining sons, are not to mourn. They are not to tear their clothes. They are not to grow their hair in mourning. Rather, the people, the nation themselves, will cry over the loss of Nadav and Avihu in this unfortunate episode. Moshe says to Aharon, I spoke with God earlier, and God said to me, Bikrovaye Kadesh, I shall sanctify myself, or will be sanctified through those closest to me. The Hachamim understand that to be referring to Nadav and Avihu, that although they did cross the boundaries before God, he nonetheless recognizes them as close ones to him, that they are brought in personally and deeply to God. As a response, Aharon does not end up eating one of the offerings that he was meant to eat, and Moshe gets quite nervous about this because already the day is terribly tense and the breaching of boundaries and the lack of protocol being adhered to. And so Moshe gets angry at Aharon and says, why didn't you eat the sacrifices as you were meant to, as I was commanded that you should? Aharon says, look at what has happened to me today. Look at what has befallen me. Do you genuinely believe that God would want me to eat sacrifices as though it was a regular day? And Moshe hears the words of Aharon, and it says, Vaitav Barinav. It was good in his eyes, and he left it and let it be. The Torah then turns to commandments to close the parasha. And interestingly, the commandments that are presented at the end of the parasha are two major issues. One, Kohanim are not to drink before they walk in to do the service in the tabernacle, and for that matter, later in the temple. They cannot drink wine when they are about to engage in the service. They cannot come in intoxicated. And their mind must be clear and sober when they engage in the service in the tabernacle before God. The second major thing that is presented are the laws of kosher animals and unkosher animals, pure animals and impure animals, which animals we can eat and which animals we cannot, and that there is a need for us to differentiate between the holy and the mundane, between the pure and the impure, to recognize the boundaries between these things, all coming back to the understanding that there was a breach of boundaries between the sons of Aharon and the presence of God, and that is something that cannot be tolerated. It has to remain intact, and all of this is in order that we should remain holy, a holy people, to know who we are and what it is that we should do and what we should not, because God himself is sacrosanct and holy.